Welcome back, Geico Outkick Studios, as he typically does. The awful Joel Klatt joins us now. Joel, when was the last time? I know you're anti-Halloween, but I think you have dressed up a couple of years recently with your sons and your wife. Did you dress up this year at all?
Well, I couldn't because I wasn't back in time.
I thought maybe you did it the day or two in advance or something like that.
There wasn't. Normally we go almost every year. Our tradition has been Disneyland does this amazing, we call it early ween, and there's like these Tuesday nights throughout October and maybe even end of September where they shut the park down and then they basically charge readmission. And you go in and they set up candy stations.
Oh, that's cool.
And the kids dress up. And obviously that wasn't available this year with their like battle royale between Disney and the state of California. But so there wasn't like an occasion to dress up before actual Halloween night. So I didn't get to this year. But in the past few years, I got to tell you, I was the pig for the Big Bad Wolf. When my son Sam was 3 years old, I dressed up in a full-blown pig costume. I've been Thing One from Cat in the Hat, Donkey Kong. When we were all going as Mario. I don't think that there's anything as cool as when your kids are like jacked out of their mind that you're dressing up with them. It's been one of the most fun things of their childhood and being their dad.
No, that is absolutely awesome. So you weren't in town for Halloween because it was on a Saturday. Instead, you were in Ann Arbor, and the expectation was, and this is just absolutely crazy, that Michigan was going to come out and take care of Michigan State. Instead, it turned into one of the worst losses of the Harbaugh era now in his sixth year. Where does Michigan go from here? What was the vibe as you could pick up on it? Were you stunned by that result?
I was pretty surprised when I evaluated the film from week one. Michigan absolutely handled Minnesota.
Yep.
And I thought Minnesota was decent, coming into the season. And this is one of those things about week ones, and we've seen this throughout college football. Think about Georgia, Arkansas. When we were like, what's going on? Why is Georgia struggling with Arkansas? And it turns out Arkansas is way better than we expected them to be. Well, I think that Minnesota is a lot worse than what we thought they were going to be. Rutgers is a lot better than we thought they were going to be. And because of that, Michigan State wasn't as bad as we thought, and Michigan wasn't as good as we thought. So it's like these domino effects that go in from week one to week two, and this is all new this year, right, Clay? Because we don't have those cupcake non-conference games where everyone gets their feet wet and they can throw out kind of their dud and still win and then get to conference play. It's like we're just seeing these things bang out right away. And we roll in there, and I talking with the coaches, the Michigan coaches, we had the best Zoom meetings that we've ever had with them, ever. Jim was talkative. He was really excited about his team. He was excited about his leadership. He was excited about Joe Milton, and I thought rightly so after watching the film. Meanwhile, doing the Zooms with Michigan State, I know Mel Tucker, obviously. He was at Colorado, and they were a struggle on those meetings, their heads were down. They were like, I don't know, because the film did not look good.
Yeah.
So I'm asking them about, hey, well, what's the health situation? How do you want to try to get your run game going? There was a couple of I don't know, Joel, we're going to try this and that, but we'll see how we hold up. So when I start the game, I'm fully expecting Michigan to kind of control the game, to be honest with you. And I was as surprised as anybody when the game played out like it did.
So where does Michigan go from here? I mean, I know this is year 6. I mean, they can't get past Ohio State. That's one thing.
Yeah.
But
and Michigan State, to be honest with you.
Yeah, right. But I mean, for my wife went to Michigan. I think that's an underrated rivalry because we talk a lot about Michigan, Ohio State. But first, you have to be the best team in your own state. And frankly, Michigan hasn't regularly done that. And that's kind of the big brother, little brother relationship. Michigan feels like they should own Michigan State, and D'Antonio didn't allow that to happen. But this year, as a 3-touchdown plus favorite, and like you said, coming off that Minnesota win, I mean, it's just I don't really know where. And you know me, I've given Harbaugh a hard time because I just think the expectations that he was going to ride in and turn into Nick Saban or Urban Meyer and Michigan's football program was going to go to immediate playoffs and contend for Rose Bowls and everything else. And we're now in the 6th year, and it doesn't look like they're going to even be in the Big Ten championship game for a 6th straight season.
Yeah, I mean, listen, all of that is absolutely accurate, and I think that the trick in this whole conversation, Clay, lies in where the bar is set. Okay, because we would all acknowledge, you included, and listen, you've taken shots at Harbaugh, and rightly so. Whatever. Because you thought the bar is too high, because and you just said
the expectations were very high. Yes,
the expectation was like Saban-esque, or
yes.
beat Ohio State, beat Urban Meyer, and yeah, you would think that was the expectation, and yet you look at what they were before he got there. Let me just read this off, right? 8-5, 7-6, 5-7. Like, that's what they were, right? So he goes 10-3, 10-3, 8-5 in a down year, 10-3. Last year 9-4. They're way better with Jim Harbaugh than they were before he got there. I think we would all acknowledge that. The problem is that fan base sees what Ohio State is doing, and they want to be that, right? And Clay, here's the nasty truth about it. Michigan has never been Ohio State in their entire history. They might be the all-time winningest, yes, but do you know how many times they've won 12 or more games in their history?
This is a great question. I mean, not many, right? Because they didn't play 12 games for very long. Yeah. 97?
Right. 97. They went 12-0.
Yeah.
Won the national championship. That's a great team, right? A great team. That's the only time
they
they've
split the national championship, as Nebraska fans will remind us. Yeah.
That's that's exactly right. And then Osborne retired and rode off to the sunset. Nebraska's never been the same.
That's right.
By the way. So, I say that because if you go back to just Urban Meyer's first year at Ohio State, they've won 12 games, I think, every year since he got there. Think about that. Right? So Michigan is not Ohio State. Bo Schembechler never won a national championship. No, again, people don't realize that, right? And so I think that we thought that Michigan was going to turn into something that they've never been, and that's the rub. So I've been categorized as this Harbaugh defender / Michigan fan because I say things like, boy, Harbaugh has been great at Michigan, and he has. For what Michigan has been in their history, he has returned them to what they are in their history. 10 wins seasons, basically 3 out of 5 years, 4 out of 5 years. That's kind of what what he's returned them to and what they are. Just go look them up, folks. This is not me pulling the wool over your eyes. Just go up on College Football Reference and look at their history. So if that's my bar, and I say, hey, Jim's been really good at Michigan, and other people's bar is Urban Meyer, Nick Saban-esque, and you've got to win a national championship, then there's a problem, and there's a difference. He certainly has not gotten to that level, and the fact that he can't beat Ohio State is an insane problem. And his next biggest problem is that it looks like Ohio State is going to get even better under Ryan Day because look how they're recruiting. Clay, I don't know if you follow the recruiting rankings, but Ohio State and Alabama right now are competing for not just the top class in next year's class, but maybe one of the best classes in all of history. Both of them are up there. Ohio State's class, even if they're second in the country behind Alabama, is going to be insanely good from a per-player ranking average. So, it doesn't seem like it's going to change anytime soon.
So what happens? How does this Jim Harbaugh-Michigan relationship end? I mean, is Harbaugh going to say, you know what, I'm fine staying there?
I was just going to say, his contract is is the shortest contract right now in all of college football.
Yeah, it's up at the end of 2021, right? He's got 1 year.
That's
Is that
correct.
right? Yeah.
That's right. And he was working on an extension in February. And to his credit, by the way, he pulled out of the extension talks when COVID hit because he's like, well, this is insane. I'm not going to, do it. And by the way, that's kind of refreshing when you actually think about it.
No, I mean, credit. That's a credit
to
him because he knows a lot of people are losing their jobs. And it also would look bad if suddenly he gets a $50 million extension when they're cutting all these different jobs in athletic departments all over the country, including probably Michigan.
That's exactly right. He's taken his 10% cut, all the things that optically you would need to do, and he didn't take a big extension. But where they go from here, I'm not totally sure. I don't know if they can. Now think about it. In every place that he's been, he's just coached out his contract and then kind of like mutually parted ways.
Right.
Think about that. It's kind of an interesting dichotomy when you look at it. So I could see that happening with Jim Harbaugh. It's impossible to predict the future, and I could see them extending him. I could see him leaving on his own. I could see them parting ways mutually. I could see a whole host of different things.
Do you think he wants to coach in the NFL again? Because I think it's probably fair to say he doesn't really want to coach anywhere else in college. So, I mean, if he were going to leave, he's not that old of a guy in the grand scheme of things. You would expect that he would go somewhere else in the NFL, right? I mean, if he were going to leave.
I firmly believe. Now, there's always a chance that this is wrong. I absolutely believe that this is Jim's last job that he's going to have.
In college football?
No, period.
Yo, you think he'll just ride off into the coaching sunset after that?
Absolutely.
Wow.
I have had, and probably, for Harbaugh, as deep a conversations as maybe anybody's had with him. But, he's said things, and I've asked him about, like, what do you want to do? How do you want this to end? And he said, someday, before too long, I'm just going to be driving around in an RV, and to me, that's heaven.
Really?
And yeah. So I don't think that he's going to coach after Michigan.
I mean, that would just be so fascinating. I mean, because I know we have guys say that, but we really haven't had that many coaches actually ever walk away, right, and just never come back. I mean, you've got the Jimmy Johnsons of the world, who are like unicorns who have tremendous success in college and pro, and then just get out and never go back. I mean, that was the talk, whether John Gruden would be that guy, and now John Gruden's back. It would be kind of fascinating if he rode off into the sunset. Now, I think the challenge for him is he'd obviously prefer not to right off into the sunset with 6 straight losses to Ohio State.
Yeah. That's obvious. And I think that he desperately wants to get it turned around at Michigan. By the way, they're recruiting really well. They're going to have the 8th ranked class in the country, right? So it's not like they're doing things poorly, but yeah, that loss, I think, puts everybody on their heels. And I think that it's a real problem when you lose. In Mel Tucker's first game, he gets the job in February. They've got an inexperienced team. They got a quarterback that's never started before. They just lost to Rutgers, and they come into your place and beat. I mean, oh my gosh, by the way, Jim Harbaugh has not lost to any other team in the Big House other than Michigan State and Ohio State. And he's only beaten them one time there. So I think
1 and 6.
1 and 6 at home against Michigan State and Ohio State. That's terrible.
We're talking to Joel Klatt at Joel Klatt on Twitter. Clemson wins, scores 24 unanswered, without Trevor Lawrence. Ohio State dominates Penn State. For the first time in 19 years as a head coach, Mike Leach doesn't score against Alabama. I imagine that you would agree there's a big gap potentially after whatever order you want to put them in, Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson. Who is the 4th best team? Who has the best chance to get into the playoff outside of those teams, particularly in light of what we saw happen in the Big 12 as well?
It's interesting because you actually asked 2 very distinctly different questions within that one question.
Yeah.
And I think you thought it was the same question, but it's not. You said who's the 4th best team and then who's got the best chance to be in the playoff.
Yeah.
I think those are two different answers because the fourth best team to me is Notre Dame. And I think that they're big, they're physical. I think their quarterbacking book limits them a little bit, but I think that they're pretty clearly the fourth best team, in particular with Georgia struggling as bad as they are with their quarterback, you know. So I really do believe that Notre Dame's the fourth best team. The problem is if they don't win Saturday, they're going to have to play likely a healthy Clemson with Trevor Lawrence at quarterback in the ACC championship game. And I just don't think that the committee is going to put them in if they've lost two games to Clemson. Because
there's no doubt.
Be like, listen, you had your shot, right? Like you had your shot and you failed. We're going to give this to somebody else. So Notre Dame's playoff life rests on one of these games. I would suggest that they win this one, right? Because you don't want to try to go beat Trevor Lawrence, and you would assume that he would be back for that ACC championship game. So they're the fourth best team. But I think the team with the best chance at the fourth spot is likely Georgia. And I know that sounds insane, but I think it's Georgia. And then and the reason being is because every time that Kirby plays Nick Saban, they have a second half lead. And like all they've got to do is bring it home one time, and you know they're going to go, because I think that they're going to end up playing Alabama in that SEC championship game.
So you think Georgia's going to beat Florida this weekend? Because I don't really necessarily buy that. I think Florida's going to beat them. And the reason why is the reason why is Stetson
17.
Yeah. The reason why to me is Stetson Bennett. Kyle Trask has the ability to get a team to 35 points, right? I mean, like he can make a lot of plays in that offense, and Tony is fantastic for Florida. I don't think Georgia has enough playmakers on offense to get past Florida. I really believe that. You know, they didn't score in the second half against Alabama. Yeah.
Let me bring up then the actual next few contenders, because it's not pretty then. Let's say Florida beats Georgia. Okay?
Yeah.
And we would all expect Alabama to beat Florida, right?
That's right.
Okay, so Georgia has 2 losses, Florida has 2 losses. Now you're sitting there, you know, Notre Dame has 2 losses in the scenario that we've just kind of played out. You know where you're down to?
Texas A&M.
Texas A&M, Cincinnati, and BYU.
In which case it would be, like it was last year, monstrously important who gets the number 1 seed, because you're going to have an absolute war like we saw last year between Ohio State and Clemson. Meanwhile, LSU got a relatively weaker, I think it's fair to say, Oklahoma team.
Yeah.
And so whoever the 1 seed is would get a favorable matchup against the 4, and then you would have a war between whoever the 2 and the 3 are.
Yeah, and that's where the Big Ten is going to screw Ohio State, because I don't think the committee will give Ohio State the benefit of the doubt without playing as many games as Clemson and Alabama would have, and in particular with the SEC going to 10 league games this year, you know, them having to play Georgia in the regular season, potentially play them again, or have to play Florida. Like, the committee's not going to give Ohio State the number 1 seed, so Ohio State's going to have to play either Bama or Clemson in the national semifinal, and then one of those other 2 teams is going to play. Dude, I'm telling you, Texas A&M. You know, Jimbo Fisher's 19-2 against non-top 10 opponents in his tenure with the Aggies, and guess what he has on his schedule? No more ranked opponents left.
Yep.
Now, Auburn might be ranked; they're not top 10 though, and so Texas A&M very well could be sitting there as a 1 loss only to Alabama with a pretty tidy resume. And if they don't like that, speaking of the committee, then I think that the next team with OU with 2 losses is going to be Cincinnati, dude.
Yeah. I mean, that's crazy. Or one of the Pac-12 teams, right? Like if one of them, which starts this weekend.
I mean, let's be honest. I mean, what are we talking about out there? I don't think that they're very strong.